Welcome into Hockey Sense, everybody. Brought to you by First Community. Great to have you with us. It's our Friday tradition here at Half Coast Studios. Big show for you today. Darren Dreger in the house. Actually, not in the house, but he's in Ontario. He'll join us, though. We'll get into lots of different things with Dregs, man. I'm looking forward to it. We got coaching news. We got lots of different things to talk about. World Championship, Stanley Cup, Conference Finals. I mean, this whole coaching thing is just taking on a life of its own. I will say that the situation with Bruce Cassidy, and I said this on Twitter, and listen, people can disagree all they want, and I get it. Listen, it sucks for Bruce Cassidy. There's no doubt. But if you think this is the first time this has ever happened, you're fooling yourself. It's happened a lot. Maybe it's not common that it gets out, but sometimes, I shouldn't say a lot. Maybe I take that back a little bit. But it happens, and it's happened more than I think people realize. And I know that it's happened in specific situations that I've covered over the years. And it was really never reported. You know, some individuals don't want it out. A lot of coaches don't want it out. But I think in this case, Cassidy, I think, would love to take one of those jobs out of the Pacific. You look at Edmonton, you look at the players they have on their roster, I think he would love that. LA, great place to live. And you just wonder if other teams would be looking to make a change. I always go back to when the Blues hired Jim Montgomery. And remember when Doug Armstrong said, well, the reason why we fired Drew Bannister was because Jim Montgomery was available. So that's why we fired Drew Bannister. And we wouldn't have fired him if Jim Montgomery wasn't available. Now, it's safe to say Drew Bannister, listen, he wasn't going to be a long-term coach here in St. Louis. Who knows if he would have even finished the season. Even if Jim Montgomery wasn't let go by Boston, somebody else would be behind that bench right now coaching the St. Louis Blues. But it's interesting that Doug Armstrong said that. Even with the Chris Knobloch situation where it got out that Edmonton asked for permission to speak to Bruce Cassidy, and everyone was like, this is so disrespectful to Chris Knobloch, you haven't even fired him. You don't think the New York Islanders talked to Pete DeBoer before they fired Patrick Waugh? You think they just fired Patrick Waugh and then called Pete DeBoer to say, hey, would you be interested? No. I think a lot of times you got to make sure that the person you identify as a person of interest has legit interest in coming and coaching your hockey club. And you could be, I would imagine you can be very safe to assume the Blues talked to Jim Montgomery before they fired Drew Bannister. I think, in fact, when the press release was sent out that they fired Bannister, I think it also announced that they were hiring Jim Montgomery. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's zero wrong with that. I would do the same thing. It's just the fact that it got out and they hadn't fired Chris Knobloch yet. Well, now you had to fire him because of all the pressure. And I said this several times. I think Connor McDavid fired Chris Knobloch months ago when he came out and was basically criticizing his coaching and how prepared the team was. And then you had Leon Draisaitl do pretty much the same thing at the end of the season. So, I mean, listen, if those guys wanted him back to coach in Edmonton, he'd still be there. I do hear Jay Woodcroft is a legit candidate in Toronto. We'll see where that goes. I know Derek Lalonde, Newsy Lalonde, that's his nickname. We had him on the Chemistry podcast. I've hung out with Newsy in the past, know a lot of people who are very close with him. Really good guy. I'd love to see him get another opportunity too. He last was a head coach with the Detroit Red Wings. But this situation with Vegas and Cassidy, I don't find anything wrong with what Vegas is doing. Now, you could look at it and say it's petty, and you could say that, well, why are they doing this to Bruce? You fired him, let him coach. But if they don't want him coaching in the division, then that's their right. That's why you have to ask for permission. Whenever you have to ask for permission to do something, well, the option of them saying no is in play. It's not like when you ask for permission, that means you have to say yes. No, you have the right to say yes or no. And in this case, Vegas is saying, no, I don't have a problem with it. I do think it sucks for Bruce Cassidy. I know he's frustrated. I know he's not happy about it. So this idea that he understands, we all know that's a bunch of BS. But, Vegas, that's the way they wanted to present it. So it is what it is. But no, I don't fault Kelly McCrimmon for all of that. Another name to pay attention to for the GM vacancy with Nashville is Mark Bergevin. I have reported about the assistant GM for the Carolina Hurricanes. And a lot of times when it goes this long, when a team is trying to hire somebody, a lot of times it's because the person they want to hire is still working. They're still in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Darren York is the guy out of Carolina. So, maybe he is the guy. Maybe it's Mark Bergevin. I do hear Nashville is being cheap. They're paying under $1 million to the general manager. $850,000. I heard Ryan Johnson in Vancouver got even less than that. Less than $850 to coach or to be the GM of the Vancouver Canucks. So he's obviously going to have to prove himself. I'm happy for RJ, though. I've said this several times now. People don't need me to repeat it over and over again. But again, really enjoyed covering him, man. I got to know RJ pretty well. He came in at a time with a lot of other younger players, the Matt Walkers, the Barrett Jackmans, the Mark Rycrofts, Mark Rycroft. There was a lot of young players. They all hung together, man, at the time. And during the lockout in 2004, 2005, I was working with the Missouri River Otters. I did their broadcasts in the early 2000s. And then when there was a lockout, they hired me back in 2004, 2005, and they hired 4 NHL players, including Jammer, Jamal Mayers, who's not going to be able to join us this week. Good luck to Crew, who's playing in a hockey tournament in Nashville. His daughter Harper graduated last night, so a lot of stuff going on with the Mayers family. But he won't be with us. And I look forward to getting his take on these playoff series as we reconvene next week. But yeah, he played for the Missouri River Otters during the lockout. Bryce Salvador did. And it was Ryan Johnson and Barrett Jackman. Those are the 4 players from the Blues that signed on. There were other NHLers that signed on with other teams. RJ had great speed. He was a great skater, just didn't really have that ability to finish. I remember sitting next to John Davidson one time during training camp, and we're just watching. There's, a drill going on, and we're watching Ryan Johnson. And JD just said, could you imagine if this guy could score? Just how good of a player he could be. Or what kind of points he would put up, because he was a good player. Just because he couldn't score doesn't mean that Ryan Johnson wasn't an effective player. He was very effective. Great penalty killer. I mean, he would put his nose, he'd put his body on the line. He'd block a shot with his face if he had to. This guy would block shots. He was so reckless. It was crazy watching he and Dallas Drake just run around. Got to catch up with Dallas Drake one of these days. But we'll get Ryan Johnson on the Chemistry podcast, man. I'm a big fan of his. Happy for him. Not happy how cheap I hear some of these teams are being, including Vancouver. Write a check. Pay these guys. Especially in a market like that where he's got to inherit that group. Deal with Elias Pettersson. Try to figure out how to get this guy going who's making $11.5 million in a market that's loud, where they criticize every move you make. He should be getting paid just based on those premises. But Mark Bergevin, Darren York, 2 names to pay attention to in Nashville for the GM vacancy. We'll see what happens there. Mark Rycroft, we'll see what happens. Not Mark Rycroft, Jay Woodcroft. We'll see what happens with Woody coming up in Toronto. He last was an assistant with Anaheim under Joel Quenneville, which I think is a great spot for him. I wouldn't hire Jay Woodcroft. He just seems like a good match, to be honest with you, under John Chaika. If they're going to want a guy who's going to come in and basically a guy who doesn't have a lot of success in this league, a lot of history in this league. I know Jay's been a head coach, but he's not really. This isn't Mike Babcock who you're hiring, who's going to be able to come in and run his own program. He's going to have to basically fall in line and do what they want him to do. And that just means the whole analytic picture and all of that, which I'm sure he's into anyway. Most coaches are nowadays. There's this idea, though, that some coaches have aged out. There's a generation gap. Did you see that about somebody made that comment about Chief and the generational gap that he had between he and a guy like William Nylander, for example, because Nylander wouldn't shoot the puck during a power play drill, and Chief got on his ass and was like, "Hey, you got a good look there, shoot the puck." And then Nylander acted like a baby and started just shooting the puck every time he got the puck in the drill, even when there wasn't a shot available. He just a lack of maturity there. And then Chief snapped on him, and people are like, "Well, there's a generational gap." And so I laid out all the top coaches because Chief is 60. I think people think he's a little bit older than that. He's 60 years old. John Cooper's 58. They say he's the best coach in the league. Rick Tockett's 62. Paul Maurice is like 59 years old. Joel Quenneville's 67. And it's hard to argue he still isn't the best coach in the National Hockey League when you look at what he did in his first year with Anaheim and what he's done throughout the course of his career. This guy had Florida ready to compete for a Stanley Cup. He would have been a back-to-back Stanley Cup champion if he would have stayed in Florida. It's too bad it didn't play out like that for the Q. But, I mean, I just listed one coach after the next. Rob Brindamore's in his 50s. Marty St. Louis in his 50s. I did think Carolina would come out and play better. We'll get into this with Darren Dreger. I don't want to get too much into both playoff series. I don't want to dive too much into the Toronto situation, Auston Matthews, all of that, because we're just going to cover the same topics with Darren Dreger. So we'll do that here coming up. And I hope you stick around. Hope you enjoy that conversation with Drakes. In terms of St. Louis, not much. You've got Dylan Holloway doing his thing at the World Championships with Robert Thomas obviously being there as well. Thomas looks great. Watched him yesterday. And Holloway's got a couple of goals too. So it's good to see these guys playing. Alexander Texier, man. I mean, this guy is such a good player. I said so many times when I would watch him practice, he was like the most impressive practice player, most skilled player on the ice. When you watch this guy practice with the Blues, there's a reason why so many other teams had interest in him when the Blues got him from Columbus. And for whatever reason, he just wasn't a fit here. I don't understand it. He just wasn't. But he's a pretty good fit there. And you look at the way Montreal was drafted over the years and all these kids that are just kind of coming into their own right now, whether it's Demidov or Slavkovsky. Remember Shane Wright being all upset about Montreal not taking him first overall? I mean, he was the consensus number one overall pick, really 12 months leading up to the draft. And all the hype was about Shane Wright. And I was at that draft in Montreal and they just shocked the hockey world and they took Uri Slavkovsky. And I remember Slavkovsky just walking up the steps. This is after he was on the podium shaking Gary Bettman's hand. And just a rousing standing ovation. I heard somebody say today that, they were booing. Maybe a little bit early on, but I just remember them celebrating the draft pick. I do remember Shane Wright being upset about it. But what a pick by the Montreal Canadiens. Between he and Cole Caulfield, Lane Hudson, who they got. I think Lane Hudson was like the third or fourth player that Montreal selected in that draft. I know he was a second-round pick, but he was like the fourth player that was selected. I think 62nd overall, something crazy. I can't believe nobody would take him. And the obvious reason why is because they were scared about his size. But Jesus, this guy has so much talent. I'm a believer now in Lane Hudson. Not that I wasn't before, but you watch him play at the highest level now. You see him in the Stanley Cup playoffs. I really believe he's a top 5 defenseman in the NHL. He and Dahlin, whatever, they're right there with each other. I like Dahlin a lot too. But then you get to the Werenskis, obviously the Hughes and the Makars. Colorado needs Cale Makar. I don't know if Colorado can win the series without him. I really don't. And I know he's skating, but if he's not ready for game 2, and if he's not ready for games 3 and games 4, I mean, is Colorado going to be able to keep their head above water until he gets back? I don't know. We'll talk to Darren Dreger about this. Looking forward to it. First Community, baby, brings us Hockey Sense here at Half Coast Studios each and every week. And I know I'm getting a lot of comments, and I love the comments, man, that we get from all the the listeners and people who watch on YouTube and listen on the podcast app, I know we're going to get into the draft. We're still just halfway through the Stanley Cup playoffs. We'll get into June. We got all of June to break it down. I'll be in Buffalo covering the draft for the St. Louis Blues once again this year. I'm looking forward to that as they have 3 first-round picks. First Community, they're hiring. I keep telling you, you're looking for a job. This is a great place to work. Join the team at First Community. Do it today. They're hiring for everything from entry-level to management positions. Equal opportunity employer with great benefits, including 11 paid holidays, paid vacations, 401k. They have a pension plan, too. And employee health and dental insurance. Not only do they have employee health and dental insurance, but it's provided at no extra cost. There's no cost for it. I mean, that's amazing. No cost to the employee for health and dental insurance. So learn more at firstcommunity.com. You can find out about upcoming job fairs and get started on your next career at First Community. Dirt Cheap Fun Fun, your one-stop party shop. Download the app today. You have a delivery of $10 or more, you get it delivered for free. Find out how you can do that on the app and find out all the great deals as well. Best selection of beer, wine, and booze. They've got that walk-in beer cooler. I love it there. Don't sleep on the party supplies. I tell you that every single week. We love our friends over at Dirt Cheap Fun Fun, your one-stop party shop. Love having them on board with us. As always, big sponsor of what we do here on Hockey Sense. Blue Note Roofing, 314-920-5713. Call David Novak today at Blue Note Roofing. You have any storm or hail damage, you need a new roof, man, he's your guy. I'll tell you that right now. But there's been so much going on with the storms. There's more storms coming. But wind, hail, storm damage, anything you need, do it and do it today and do it the right way with Blue Note Roofing. If your roof's 10 years of age or over, a lot of times the insurance companies won't pay for the new roof. So if your roof is approaching 10 years old, get them out there for a free estimate. Let them take care of you. David Novak, he's the best. 314-920-5713. St. Louis Lawn Equipment, man. Your outdoor power equipment superstore. They got everything. This place, you ever been in one of these? This place is just so fun to go walk around with all the commercial mowers and the residential mowers. They've got the handheld equipment with the leaf blowers and all that stuff. Snow equipment. If you want a snow blower, this is the place to go. Trailers. If you're looking to hook something up to your truck. New inventory, but they also have pre-owned inventory as well. So look at the pre-owned stuff. If you have a lawnmower that's not working properly, they can repair it for you. They have a full service shop. If you need a part, you want to fix it yourself, you can go in there and get the part. I love it. St. Louis Equipment, check it out. I think they have 4 stores. They're also cutting my lawn right now, making it look like Petco Park, man. I love it. So St. Louis Equipment, check that out. Check it out today. Lordo's Diamonds. Get that special someone, something special in your life over at Lordo's Diamonds, lordosdiamonds.com. Great jewelry for anybody. Great selection of engagement rings, best customer service with Mike and Jimmy Lordo and Pat and everybody over there, Cindy. But they also have great men's watches and chains if you want to look at that too. Unbelievable customer service. You can go in there with a $500,000 budget or a $500 budget. And guess what? You're going to get treated exactly the same. So do it and do it today with our friends over at Lordo's Diamonds. All right, let's take a break. Darren Dreger, he joins me next. We'll talk to him, get into a lot of different things around the NHL. Can't wait for this conversation with Dregs. It's been a while since we've caught up with him. It's a busy time in the NHL. Conference finals, coaching vacancies, general manager vacancies, star players potentially shuffling around. We'll get into all of that coming up next with Darren Dreger from TSN. I'm Andy Strickland. Thanks for hanging out here at Half Coast Studios. Here on Hockey Sense, brought to you by First Community. All right, Darren Dreger is with us as always. We always appreciate the time. It's a busy time. I know it's the conference final. I just feel like there's so much going on right now, Dregs.
Yeah.
With premier teams too, whether it's Toronto and Edmonton and now Vegas, obviously in the news. Like, what's the most interesting thing happen or going on with you that you feel like you're tracking on a daily basis?
Well, obviously, primarily Canadian based. I'm watching what Edmonton is doing and watching what the Toronto Maple Leafs are doing, and both clubs are in a coach search mode. More complicated for the Edmonton Oilers because of the Vegas Golden Knights, but I know that their process has begun. You know this. I mean, they've had communications with Craig Berube, formerly of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I can see him being a fit. I mean, when you look at Andy, when you look at the type of coach the Oilers feel that they want and they need, okay, I can appreciate it starts with Bruce Cassidy, but right or wrong, Bruce Cassidy isn't available. And there's no definitive sign that he will be given permission to speak to the Oilers by the Vegas Golden Knights. Okay, so if you feel you need that level of experience, then with all due respect to the qualified coaches out there, that list gets pretty short, doesn't it? And you see Berube, who, of course, is a Stanley Cup champion, did not have the season that he was expecting with the Toronto Maple Leafs. That ultimately led to his demise. I would argue that a lot of it was out of his control, but he has a lot of the credentials. He has the personality, the character, and the drive of a coach that I think would work well and fit well in Edmonton. And then I throw another decorated resume and experienced coach and Peter Laviolette out there. So those are the men, and I'm sure there are others. And I don't like name dropping because if you do it with three guys, there's probably six or eight, maybe 10. So you're skipping over people in that process. But Edmonton is different than Toronto, and they're both different than what the LA Kings might do with their potential vacancy on the Kings bench. So the coaching carousel is one of the big stories that the insiders are somewhat fixated on here.
And I always look at when you're hiring a coach, I mean, a lot of it depends on where you are as an organization. That sometimes determines what kind of coach you're looking for. So Toronto, what are they looking for? And where did things go south with Berube? How did things change so quickly? Because I feel like a year ago, he was in such good standing with the fan base there and the organization, and things changed so quickly, Darren.
Well, you know what, Andy? And the Marner haters aren't going to like this. I think that was where things started to pull apart at the seams, to be fair. Marner was one of those players that Berube knew that he could lean on, and not in a negative way, right? In a positive way. He was a quiet but a very solid leader inside that room and around that organization. And sure, he's been chastised openly and repeatedly for what he didn't do in the playoffs. For me, that blame game should have been spread and shared by many, including the leaders, the decorated leaders of the Maple Leafs. But there, and Berube talked about it, and others around the organization have talked about it. For whatever reason, the buy-in wasn't there from very early in the season last year. And when you don't have full-scale commitment, it's hard for a coach to get what he needs out of the players, especially the way that Berube needed them to play. They weren't the same team. You don't replace the 100 plus points that Mitch Marner, delivered on an annual basis in Toronto. So that productivity had to be spread from other areas. And to play his style, as you know better than anybody, you've got to have some intestinal fortitude. In fact, an abundance of that. And it's not an easy ask. It isn't. So I think that was part of the challenge. Anthony Stolarz coming out early in the year and effectively calling out his teammates and probably shared some of the concerns of the head coach and others around the organization who wanted them to play a certain way. I think it just kind of further eroded the overall commitment. That's the way it looked anyway. And we keep hearing little bits and pieces of that. And injury in certain situations took the toll. Austin Matthews never did look like he was entirely up to speed, health or otherwise. So I think there were a myriad of factors that went into ultimately Berube losing his job.
You may not remember the game, but when Toronto played in St. Louis, and it was the day after Kelly Chase had a big celebrity game here in St. Louis, and there was a ton of alumni at the game. And I was interviewing guys during the game for our television broadcast. So I was in the suite a big portion of the game, and guys couldn't believe how bad Toronto looked. Like the effort in that game from that had to be their worst game of the year. And And I remember talking to Chief afterwards being like, I just feel like you have a player problem. I mean, it's like you don't have good
Mm,
enough players to play the way that you want them to play or the way that everyone expects
yeah.
them to play. So I just wonder what kind of coach like I guess they haven't talked to Bruce Cassidy. I mean, would that even make sense for the roster right now? I mean, what kind of coach would make sense? Would a Jay Woodcroft make sense to work under John Chaika? Like, how do you see a fit, eventually?
Yeah, I mean, Woodcroft is an interesting study. He's a cerebral coach, as we know. I think getting fired by the Edmonton Oilers it was helpful in the overall building of his coaching career. It humbled him. I had some success working with Joel Quenneville, obviously in Anaheim. So he'll be a different, and I would submit a better coach his next time around. Uh, so I could see him being on John Chaika's list. Absolutely, no doubt about that. They're very early, and in fact, I was told this morning, Andy, they're in the initial
Mm.
stages of communicating with these coaches. So they're not in person interviewing yet, talking to guys on the phone, having virtual discussions. So that wide open list, I think, is still pretty vast. So where do you want to go? Do you want to go to David Carl, who I know you've talked a bit about this. David Carl will coach in the NHL when he feels he's ready and his family is ready for him to coach in the NHL. I mean, he's decorated enough in the NCAA with the championships won in Denver that he doesn't have anything to prove to anybody. He's ready. He'll get his opportunity when the time is right. Um, Derek Lalonde on the bench in Toronto, could he be a fit coming out of the experience that he had in Detroit? How deep do they want to go? I mentioned Peter Laviolette with the Edmonton Oilers, and we know that Laviolette is communicating with some clubs who have expressed interest. Could Toronto be there? So I'm taking you all over the map with what the Maple Leafs might do, but I think it's a challenge for Chaika and for Matt Sundin because they don't know what their roster is going to look like entirely
Mm.
for the start of next season. Now, if you're going into the retool, which Berube preached pretty hard in favor of to keep his job, obviously, and Keith Pelley, they had a Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment on the sports division side, made it clear that they didn't have to rebuild. Okay, all right. Well, let's talk about that. They need at least a number 2 center so that you can give support to Matthews at 1. Tavares moves down to number 3. What about a winger? Be great if they added a top 6 winger. Well, is that going to come organically through the drafting of Gavin McKenna? That's a lot to put on a kid, a teenager coming into the National Hockey League. And if he's not quite ready to take on a role like that, you've got to add somebody else. And then there has to be change on their blue line. They need a top 3, top 2 right shot defenseman. They need another one. Again, where are they getting all these pieces, Andy, if you're endorsing the retool? And so that has a lot to do in factoring into as well what coach you go with moving forward.
Exactly. And I go back to that game in St. Louis. I mean, a lot of the alumni who are watching, they were just and Matthews didn't play in that game. You didn't have Tanev in that game. It wasn't like the roster that you would come into the season thinking you were going to have anyway. But just disappointing with the effort. And if you go back and look at that box score, if you can't remember, it was just a puzzling game for the Maple Leafs at that time. But I look at David Carl as a guy who I think he's going to want to go somewhere where he feels like he could win relatively soon and maybe have a say in personnel
Yeah.
as well. And I hesitate to even say this, but I'll say it to you anyway. I feel like why not be patient? I mean, Jared Bednar, as great as he's been, is he going to be
Yeah.
there forever? Like, will there ever be an opportunity where
Right.
David Carl doesn't have to leave Denver to coach in the National Hockey League? He did a hell of a job this year. Bednar did, so he's not leaving anytime soon. But you just
Right.
win that opportunity, and is he patient enough to wait for that situation to open up?
Yeah, I guess, and this is going to sound very Canadian of me, and I am not a Maple Leafs fan in any way, shape, or form, but I'm reminded by coaches and managers all the time since I moved to Toronto back in 1998 from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. I've been reminded the same thing over and over and over and again, and this is why the Doug Armstrong rumors continually surface, because if you're hired by the Toronto Maple Leafs in either capacity of general manager or head coach, arguably the 2 most coveted positions
Yeah,
in the
no
NHL.
doubt, no doubt.
You know, and it speaks to the history. They haven't won a Stanley Cup since 1967, but there is something special about the brand of the Toronto Maple Leafs, the resources of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and oh, what if you were the coach and general manager tandem that brought a Stanley Cup? I mean, they're literally putting statues of you outside the building.
I know.
I mean, and does that motivate somebody like David Carl to go, okay, yeah, I can be patient here. I know I'm going to run a good program. I've got great resources. My family is comfortable here financially. I'm being treated incredibly well in the NCAA, but it's the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm not going to compare a college job to the Toronto Maple Leafs job. And to be honest with you, I'm surprised at some of these guys who have that opportunity that they just don't jump at it and they don't go to the National Hockey League. Because I just find that, it's different than being the head coach of like the Duke basketball program or something like that, where you get so much national attention. It's essentially a better job than a lot of NBA jobs. I don't know what the Denver job is. I mean, I know it's comfortable and they get paid well, but they don't get paid NHL money at the college level. So
not Leafs money.
Yeah, not Leafs money. So you just wonder how that'll play out. Do you have a problem with Vegas saying no to Bruce Cassidy? I mean, the fact that you have to ask for permission gives them the right to say no, right?
Yeah, and I've been following your tweeting on this, and I think we're aligned in our thinking. I don't have a problem with it, to be blunt, and I guess the reason I don't is it's a tip of the cap to Bruce Cassidy. I mean, obviously, Kelly McCrimmon and George McPhee and Bill Foley, the Vegas Golden Knights hierarchy, had a front row seat to watch this man at the highest level of his craft coach an NHL team, the Vegas Golden Knights, to a Stanley Cup championship. Right now, if there's a knock on Bruce Cassidy, like every coach, they have a shelf life. And it gets to a point with Cassidy and some very successful coaches where you've squeezed every drop of juice out of each individual player, and it's just time to move on. And that's where Cassidy got to with the Vegas Golden Knights, and McCrimmon had to pull the trigger. That's why they made the change, is because they could see that this team wasn't responding anymore. They felt strongly that John Tortorella would give them that boost, that injection that they needed. And so far, the proof is in the pudding. But again, Andy, think of this. Like, McCrimmon and George McPhee are highly educated on what makes Bruce Cassidy a successful coach. So you're going to allow him to go to Edmonton, an arch rival in the division, in the Western Conference, so they can take you down and Edmonton can win a cup or two or more in the early tenure of his coaching contract in Edmonton?
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that either.
No.
I mean, if a team out east wants to have a crack at, if Toronto wants to call Bruce Cassidy, well, that's a different animal. Yeah, I'll let you go east. Yep, you've got permission. Good luck. I hope it goes well for you. I mean, Bill Foley is like every other NHL owner. I mean, superbly good at what they do as elite level businessmen. He doesn't want to burn $4.5 million paying somebody that isn't employed by the organization for another year. So this is just shrewd competitiveness, and I'm there for it.
I'm here for it too. And I love that Vegas just does their own thing. Now, I didn't like the whole media. I thought that was foolish, to be honest, Dregs. Like, you just clinched a series. You don't talk to the media. Like, why put your organization in a jam like that? I didn't feel that was necessary, but.
What, the Tortorella thing?
Yeah, Tortorella thing. And not opening up the line.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's petty, in my opinion. If you're upset about a suspension or if you feel like you've got to get to the airport, I just think there's different ways to communicate that frustration,
Yeah, no, I hear you. But look, I mean, Kelly McCrimmon, faced the media with John Tortorella sitting right beside him, as you saw, and he put it on Torts. It was a mistake.
He did.
It was a bad call. He wasn't like this was a collective decision. We just decided because of the curfew in Anaheim that we had to get out. Sorry, media, we'll pay the fine. No. He went, no, we missed an opportunity to embrace the special moment with our fans through our committed media, and we didn't do that.
Yeah.
And John made a mistake. So, you move on from it. And look, there's no guarantee. We know that McCrimmon and company went through the NHL hearing, and the National Hockey to Get office isn't ready to relent yet and give back that forfeited second-round draft pick. My gut tells me that in good faith, Vegas will eventually earn that pick back, but we have no idea when that might be.
No.
Probably won't be anytime soon. But I don't know if you heard this or not, and I just learned of it earlier this week, but fairly successful PR guru by the name of John Rosasco, who spent decades with the New York Rangers, was part of that Stanley Cup championship back in '94, tightly aligned with Brendan Shanahan, was working with Shanahan with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Shanahan got fired. Rosasco finished the year. He's now joined the Golden Knights on the road. And whether it's just on a part-time contractual, advisory sort of role until the end of the year, I don't know. But that's, what I think that is, and I don't think I know. That's the history and the relationship between John Tortorella, then with the New York Rangers, and John Rosasco, who was the head of public relations for the New York Rangers back in the day. JR knows how Tortorella ticks and knows what his triggers are. And I think this is just Torts management until the last game of the season, whenever that is.
Because I look at most PR staffs, especially when Torts has only been there for a handful of weeks, and he's like, no, we're not opening up the room, and I'm not talking. I don't know too many PR guys that would say, no, Torts, you're going out there. There may be a few, but you got to have that relationship.
Well, JR would be one of those.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's a smart play. And I like that about Vegas because they spare no expense and they do whatever they got to do to improve their organization. So, and Kelly McCrimmon, he talked for a long time. I mean, he didn't stumble a word. He did a really good job of explaining, and the way that he handled himself at the press conference, I was actually pretty impressed by it. So, but the situation with Edmonton, when they asked to speak to Cassidy before firing Chris Knobloch, because I look at it like the Blues talked to Jim Montgomery before they fired Drew Bannister. I mean, you got to know that you can replace him, that the guy that you want even wants to come coach your team. I was in San Jose with the team when, actually that was at the trade deadline, but I'm looking at, Pete DeBoer obviously coming in. They had to have talked to him before they fired Patrick Waugh. So it's just the fact that it got out. I felt like Knobloch was going to be on his way out anyway after some of the comments from McDavid and Draisaitl. Was that big of a deal? How do you look at that one?
Well, it was orchestrated. I don't think that there's any doubt of that. The leak I'm talking about being orchestrated, and that's not new. That happens a lot. I think that would have been the preference of the Oilers, right? So they have access to Bruce Cassidy. It's never clean. You're still going to have blood on your hands for firing a coach in Chris Knobloch, who's entering a 3-year contract extension. But the fan base and everybody around the league would make sense of it because, okay, all right, Knobloch didn't get the job done. We know he helped that team to back-to-back Stanley Cup finals. But in the end, they failed and were exited in round one. So we've got a successful veteran coach here who's got a proven resume, all of that stuff. We'll replace him with him. Until it didn't happen, right? And so it gets leaked out. And I can conjure up, I don't know how it got leaked out. I've got a pretty good idea of how it got leaked out and why it would get leaked out. And if it came from the Oilers side, wouldn't it be obvious they're just trying to put pressure on the Vegas Golden Knights, for doing the unthinkable and not giving permission to talk to Bruce Cassidy? So I felt bad for Chris Knobloch. In the process, he deserved better than that. People always forget that there's a family element to this. And I'll reflect back to an experience that I had years ago when Paul Maurice was coaching the Toronto Maple Leafs. And Paul and I, we go back many, many years. We worked closely at a World Championship back in 2005, got to know each other, so our families know each other. There's a friendship base there, right? Now, I respect what he does, so we keep a distance during the season, right? When I see him, we'll have some chuckles and all of that. But he gets fired by the Maple Leafs, and he reaches out to me to tell me that he's been let go. And he goes, Driggs, I need you to do me a favor. He goes, I'm on my way to my kid's school. Can you just hold on until I get there? I want to tell my kids because I don't want them to read about it or hear about it from one of their schoolmates. Can you do that for me? And that has always stuck with me, Andy, because, even though it's pro sports, coaches get paid a lot to coach, players get paid a lot to play. They're still human beings with pressures and family experiences, and they're protective dads and all of that. So I felt bad in that respect for Knobloch having to deal with it for the days that he had to deal with it before it was inevitably decided.
How do you balance that though, Drake? Because I have a hard time. I feel like
Yeah.
the closer I get to people around the league, the more open they are with you, but the understanding is like you're not going to report it, and that's why they're telling you.
Yeah.
You have that relationship, so it's hard. Like I always say, like a good insider probably reports 10% of what they know.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of stuff. You don't report everything. That's a tough balance. So when you have those relationships, at least I find it that way.
Yes. But both of us been around the business long enough to know that um, the people that we deal with also understand our side of the business,
Mhm.
right? And if there isn't that family hesitation that I already described with the experience that I had with Paul Maurice, then most guys will just go, hey, hey, look, earlier this week, Adam Foote gets fired by the Vancouver Canucks.
Yeah.
I just kind of weirdly stumbled on it in the morning. And, inevitably, there's a bit of a back and forth. I mean, you got to get it from a couple of different sources, and then you go with it. I knew about it probably an hour before I reported it because I'm waiting on the secondary source
Yeah.
to make sure that their level of comfort is there to report it publicly, and ultimately that's what happened. But you're bang on. I mean, and I'm fortunate at TSN, well, in many, many ways, but I worked with the best in Bob McKenzie. Bob McKenzie was my mentor. I still just talked to him the other day. He's doing well, by the way. His son, Mike, is the general manager of the Kitchener Rangers. He just won the Ontario Hockey League. So the McKenzie family's going to the Memorial Cup this week in Kelowna. But, he approached everyone with fairness. And sometimes that's difficult based on the level of reporting that you're doing. But as long as you have the support of your bosses who understand exactly what you said, we as insiders cannot report everything we know, or we'd be out of the insider business in a hurry.
Yeah.
Because our sources would dry up. You just can't do that. So as long as everybody around you appreciates and understands that that's a big part of the job, then that's how you manage it.
Before I let you go, Nashville. eh, I keep hearing Darren York, and maybe
Yeah.
that's the delay. Now Mark Bergevin, his name is kind of like floating out there a little bit. Where do you see this going? Why is it taking so long for them to hire a GM?
Yeah. I mean, I've heard the Darren York stuff speculated on, and I was told this week that it's unfounded. Now, I don't have the information to say he's out per se, but that it could be premature at best. So if it's not York from the Carolina Hurricanes, then who is it? Is it somebody else? I mean, there are only 4 teams remaining now in the conference finals. Is it somebody that we don't know about? If it's not one of the obvious. So somebody close to Tom Fitzgerald said earlier this week he hasn't heard anything. And I think a lot of us thought, okay, well, Fitzy, former player, very, very well respected in Nashville, when he got cut loose by New Jersey, that he would have a real good shot. And yet, if he were the guy, it feels like they would have announced that he was the guy by now, right? And Mark Bergevin, that one is, I don't understand it at all. And not just specific to Nashville. I'm just generally speaking here. Bergevin, every general manager has made mistakes. He made mistakes in Montreal, but he is a solid manager with a good eye for talent. So there's so many of those guys. We can go down the list forever. But back to Nashville, it just feels like they're waiting for somebody. And I think that's why the Darren York rumor continues to have legs.
Okay, 2 more things for you. Gavin
Yeah.
McKenna, he's got to be the consensus, right? I mean, you don't want to overthink it, but what are you hearing on the first overall pick for Toronto?
Yeah, I mean, the consensus pick, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's a deadlock for the Toronto Maple Leafs. They're not going to acknowledge that. I guess I feel like I'd be surprised if he wasn't. Just generally, whether it was Vancouver that gets first pick overall or San Jose moved up to get the number 2 spot. Toronto Maple Leafs come out of the blue to get the first pick overall. Just because of everything that goes into the game of Gavin McKenna. And make no mistake about it, when you pick first overall, there's marquee value to making that pick. There's marketability to making that pick. And you know, to add a dynamic player. Now, Matt Sundin maybe puts a little bit of heat on John Chaika and the scouting staff. Says there's a pretty good Swedish player who wouldn't look bad in a Maple Leafs uniform.
Yeah, I know.
So we could maybe see that, but I always concede to Craig Button and the draft gurus, and they continue to tell me that, you know, McKenna remains the consensus. So until I get information from somebody inside the Toronto Maple Leafs that says it isn't a firm deal, then I'm going to believe that it is.
You haven't seen too many teams make a mistake at the top of the draft in recent years, including Montreal, who took, you know, Uri Slafkovsky, who just looks like he's just coming into his, he's just growing in front of everybody's eyes game by game. So he had a hell of a game last night. Which surprised you more? I guess Makar not playing maybe didn't surprise you as much as Vegas winning, but were you surprised with Montreal just really kind of taking it to Carolina the way that they did?
Yeah, that was the surprising aspect of that game. And we all played the angle of rest/rust versus rhythm, right? You know, team who's only played 8 games in 36 days, and the Carolina Hurricanes off for the better part of 12 days versus the Montreal Canadiens, who, you know, around 72 hours after eliminating the Buffalo Sabres in Game 7, they've got to buckle up and get ready for a really good Carolina team. Couldn't have asked for a better start. I mean, the Hurricanes forechecked, first shift of the game, poof. Their top line, who's come under scrutiny to this point of the playoffs, finds a way to open the scoring. Okay, here we go. The crowd is on its feet. Terrific. And seconds later, Montreal's top line answers, and then the Montreal Canadiens just rolled with it after that. And it was just in the fashion of how Montreal was creating with their speed, their transition, the odd man rushes, the breakaways, the just how discombobulated the Hurricanes were in the defensive zone. Like the bread and butter of the Carolina Hurricanes just wasn't there. It was crazy.
That's who they are. I mean, it's crazy. But you know, I love this Jakob Dobas. I mean, known him since he's come to St. Louis at 16 or it was just a great story to see him doing what he's doing and his personality come alive and all of that. Last thing, because I don't want to. My inbox will just get. I'll get all the complaints. Are you hearing anything on Kyrou, for example? Anything like Blues related from a? Are you there yet? Like, where are you focusing on any of these guys who could be potentially get traded around the draft? Or are we too early for that?
A little bit early, but I did hear this week that St. Louis is trying hard to move up in the draft, and there seems to be at least some willingness from San Jose's perspective to consider moving that pick. So imagine if the Blues could figure out a way to utilize their first round picks to move up. There'd be a player, I think, that would have to be attached. You know, maybe they could take a crack at Stenberg if he's available. There's a lot of buzz around Caleb Malholtra, Manny Malholtra's son, you know, who most think Vancouver would like to get their hands on the 3 spot. But there does seem to be a growing sense that, and then among other things, right? Maybe the Blues revisit some of the conversations that they had with Buffalo around the trade deadline. There was something big brewing with the Anaheim Ducks and the St. Louis Blues around that same time. There was something big brewing, and the pieces just didn't fall into place. So again, maybe there's something there, but I'd keep an eye on the Blues trying to move up as high as they possibly can get in the first round.
Yeah, okay. 11 and 15, moving those two. You're not going to move those two to get to number 2, but to your point, you'd have to attach a quality piece with those draft picks. Dregs, thanks so much, man. You know I appreciate it. Great stuff today, as always.
All right. Thanks, Andy.
We'll see you. Are you going to be at the draft in Buffalo?
I'll be at the draft. Okay. Yes, I will.
Okay. I'll see you out there. Appreciate it. Enjoy the playoffs.
Okay, buddy.
Okay, take care. All right, so we appreciate Darren Dreger for joining us, as always. Great stuff, man. How about that, about the Blues really looking to move up? Now, and I have said that because some people have said, hey, can they move up and can they get this San Jose pick? Well, 11 and 15 isn't going to do it. Even if you attach the 3rd first-round pick, which is going to be Colorado's pick, is not going to do it. you would have to include a significant piece, in an effort to get that second overall pick, and probably a significant piece to get into the top 5 with any of these teams that are picking in the top 5. I do think you could move 11 and 15 and potentially get into the top 10, towards the bottom of the top 10. But if you're going to add a big-time piece, and, I don't think you'd have to move a Snuggerud, but they would want a player like him, and the Blues aren't going to move a player like Snuggerud, for example. But you just wonder, there's other players, obviously. The Blues had a top 10 pick a few years back. Could they dangle that player? Well, we'll see how this plays out. Very, very interesting. And looking forward to following it all as we get closer to the draft. But we got to get through the Stanley Cup final and the conference final first before we even get to the Stanley Cup final. But great stuff from Dregs, as always. Looking forward to see who's going to get that head coaching job in Edmonton, in Toronto, the GM job in Nashville, the head coaching position, which I think a lot of people think it's going to be Manny Malhotra is going to get that job in Vancouver. I think the thought process was Toronto was really interested in hiring Manny Malhotra, who's had a lot of success coaching in the American Hockey League. He's won a Calder Cup down there, a championship, and I think this is the play they had to make if they're going to be able to keep Malhotra inside the organization. That'd be something, though. They hire him as the head coach and then draft his son 3rd overall. So anything's possible. Hockey Sense is always brought to you by First Community. Check out firstcommunity.com today. We told you all about the jobs that are available. They're hiring. So go apply, go look at their website, and work at First Community. The new Tesson Ferry location is now open. The Vacation Club account, I love this because with summer basically being here, school's getting out, you got to pay for your vacation. And everything is more expensive right now. But don't stay home. There's no reason to stay home. So if you want to play now and pay later, you can look into it with a vacation loan at First Community. Consider this First Community Visa with a rate of 7.9%. That's right, 7.9%. No annual fee. And by the way, you say 7.9%. Well, the average credit card, the rate's over 20%. But as always, be careful using your credit card. And if you're really thinking about it, though, you'll open a First Community Vacation Club account now, and then this time next year, you're going to have saved up for your vacation. So it's the best way to go. Ask about it and do it today. Blue Note Roofing, call David Novak today, 314-920-5713. Of course, St. Louis equipment, used equipment, new equipment, snow equipment, parts, service, whatever it is you're looking for, stlouisequipment.com. Find a store nearest you. Lordo's Diamonds, lordosdiamonds.com. Dirt Cheap Fun, your one-stop party shop. And, of course, Easy Tiger Cannabis, Easy Tiger AZ. Easy Tiger Cannabis. Check it out today. Top shelf products. Whether you're dealing with pain, some type of illness, anything that you need to make yourself feel better. Recreational use, that's always in play as well. But talk to the experts. EasyTigerAZ.com, have it shipped to your front door. We love everything they're doing today. At Easy Tiger Cannabis, everybody over there, Space, the whole crew. Nick, everyone over at EasyTigerAZ.com. All right, this has been Hockey Sense. We appreciate Dreger for joining us. That was a great conversation. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And no Jamal Mayers this week. As always, Jammer is brought to you by Dobbs Tire and Auto Center. Find the location nearest you. Full service auto shop. They take great care of you. I've had so many issues with tires and my wife running over nails and whatever. They get you in and out. I know they say it and it's cliche. It's so true, though. Dobbs Tires and Auto Centers. Check it out. Get to a location nearest you if you need new tires. Got that road trip coming up, put some new tires on it. They'll save you money. Always have great deals as well. And then spas and more. We had Angie Hess on with us last week. Who puts the in spa? Angie Hess does. You hear us talking about it on the Camister podcast as well. Hot tubs, saunas. They got those infrared saunas. You can put them inside your house. You can watch a movie inside of there. You can take your cell phone inside these saunas. Cold tubs. You can have a cold tub, you can have a sauna. Go back and forth, then get in the hot tub. Relax, enjoy yourself. You got an athlete in the family, make sure they're taken care of and they're recovering properly. Find the location nearest you. Angie Hess with spas and more. They've got a location in Kansas City, one here in St. Louis as well. Who puts the eye on spa? Angie Hess does. All right, for Aiden, for Maddie, for Alex, everybody here with Half Coast Studios, I'm Andy Strickland, reminding you to keep your head up and your stick on the ice. We'll do it again next Friday here at Half Coast Studios. Have a great holiday weekend, everybody. All right, so, we talk about our friends over at Travel House all the time, Gail Alshey, all the great people over there who are, putting vacations together and allowing people to get a little R&R because you all know that we need it in the worst way. And there's a lot of great people out there that can help you out, that can answer a lot of questions for you, including Alex Valeri, who joins us now here on Hockey Sense. Great to see you, Alex. Thanks for doing this. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. I'm excited for it.
You're lucky. You get to work in the travel industry. So I'm just curious, before we get into some of the stuff that you do, where's your favorite place to go? If you need to relax and get away, what's the number one destination for you?
For me personally, it's always going to be Mexico, but we have to remember Mexico is so broad, just like America, right? The East Coast is very different than the West Coast, and the North and the South are very different. So my personal favorite destination in Mexico is Cabo, personally.
I know.
You got the desert, you got the mountains, you got the sea, you got the palm trees, you got everything in between, and the humidity is not that bad. So
Yeah, I know. How hot is it going to be in the Dominican Republic in the summer? Is it hotter than Mexico, or is it the temperature not that bad?
I think they're pretty equivalent when it comes to the temperature. I think you'll be good. I mean, it does get pretty warm, and it is kind of a warmer summer from what I've been hearing recently from people going down. But the beautiful thing is, you'll have a beautiful beach, and you'll have wonderful pools that you can go in and just dip and cool off. And the beaches in the Dominican are absolutely stunning, so
Really?
you will not have any problem there.
I
Yeah.
know. I know. They look stunning. I've been looking at the pictures. So, what do you do for Hyatt specifically? Tell our audience.
So I work specifically with our travel advisors and travel agencies throughout my specific territory in the US. So I work directly with Gail and Mike at Travel House and all of the advisors there and just educate them on all of our properties. Now being part of Hyatt, we're opening more and more properties in a lot more rapid of a pace. So keeping up with those and knowing everything that what those specific properties entail, it's hard for everybody to keep track, especially if they don't have the training on them. So that's kind of what I do specifically with the advisors. So they're as well versed as possible to give you guys the best advice. All of our resorts are a little bit different, so point you in the right direction for where you need to go and what's going to be the best fit for you and your vacation.
Yeah, and these all-inclusive resorts, at one time they kind of had a stigma that they were like cheap, they're dirty, there's just people running around everywhere. It's a big part. But that's not the case at all. I mean, there's a lot of all-inclusive resorts that are among the nicest resorts you can go to in the world. Am I wrong about that?
No, you are 100% right. They did definitely start as kind of like a budget beach vacation. You go there, it's cost effective because everything's included. But now we're getting to the point where we need more, and there's a lot more niche travel that's going on. So whether that's a milestone birthday, a honeymoon, or anniversary, maybe you're already living that luxury lifestyle. Do you really want to slum it at an all-inclusive that's, maybe a value one? No, you want to go to that upscale, high-end butler service and everything. So the all-inclusive world has evolved so much, even in the last 7 years, just by offering different types of vacations and different types of properties that really do have that specific niche for whatever you're trying to go to.
Yeah, and like the cuisine, like the food, like the high-end chefs, right? The quality of the food
Oh, yeah.
is
Yeah.
there, right? So you're not sacrificing quality when you're going to an all-inclusive.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Not sacrificing quality at all. I think I've had my favorite, best cut like butter steak at an all-inclusive at Playa del Carmen in Mexico. And it
Okay.
was absolutely stunning. It was a 7-course meal. We had a sommelier with us that paired the wines and everything. So you're not giving up the luxury when you're going. You just have to choose the specific and right resort for that.
All right, so for you, selling the right resort, right? I mean, the importance of matching the resort with the client. So you got to feel it out with the client, right? See what they're all about, what they're looking for. Then you try to take that and then match the right resort with their specific requests.
Exactly, exactly. Because imagine if you were going with your significant other down and you were wanting a romantic getaway and you're put at this family friendly water slides, kids screaming everywhere, no adult, and like how much of a romantic getaway is that? That's not going to be a good vacation for you. And eventually that's going to maybe scare you even from going back down there later on. So we have just within the Hyatt umbrella, we have 11 all-inclusive properties that fit different niche of travel. So whether that is high-end luxury or just romantic getaways, luxury, family friendly to a little bit more budget friendly, we have everything in between that. And that's where, the travel agencies really come in, and those travel agents really come in because they know what each of those brands represent and what they're going to offer whenever you go.
Yeah, listen, Gail and Mike, and I deal with Gail. I've been dealing. I would never book a vacation without her anymore. She does everything for me, and she knows where I
Yeah.
want to go. So that travel agent, like, it's so important. Like, don't be afraid to use a travel agent. Like, people think, oh, I don't want to use it. It's just too much work, and it's going to cost you. No, 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 no. They're there to help you, right?
Yes. Yeah, very, very much so. And especially I think over when COVID and all of that happened, I think it was a real wake up call to a lot of people how important travel advisors are. Because those canceled flights, you got to rebook, those
Yeah.
canceled hotels and getting that credit back. Like they do all of that for you. If anything happens, a storm comes through, Mother Nature, unforgiving sometimes. We can't control that, but they can help you get on the next flight out. Don't worry about your hotel. They've already been in contact with them. Get you an extra night booked so you didn't miss a whole day of your vacation, and they take care of everything. It's just a lot of work off of your shoulders.
Okay. Before I let you go, your favorite resort. Give me your favorite
Yeah.
resort.
Oh gosh, my favorite resort right now, I gotta say it's Secrets Playa Blanca in Costa Mujeres. So it's just north of Cancun. It's
Ooh.
one of our newer properties. It just opened about a year and a half, 2 years ago. Just won the AAA 5 Diamond Award, and it has a cozy luxury feel to it. So it has the conversation pits around the property with bonfire pits in the middle,
Oh.
nice and cushioned seats and couches where you can just go and hang out with your friends. You don't have to go to the lobby bar or anything. You can just really find your little niche, little nook around the property with a nice drink. And it's awesome. I just love it. It's so cozy, and the luxury at that property is amazing. The staff is wonderful and they do a fantastic job.
All right, and let's squash any fears. It's always like Mexico, Dominican Republic. I mean, totally safe, right?
Absolutely safe. I always say go to a big city in the US. At night, you're probably not walking around. You're not walking around downtown Chicago. You're not walking around downtown St. Louis. It's not always safe. It's the same thing in Mexico. Do they have unsafe areas? Yes, but those are not going to be the areas that you're going to go to unless you're not smart and you want to do that and go off the beaten path. That is your choice. But there's nothing that we do not have up here that they have down there. They welcome us to Mexico. They welcome us to the Dominican. They want us to come there. They want to serve us. They want us to show us a good time because they want us to come back.
Right.
Okay, that's their goal. So no fear. I went to Mexico when all of that was going on in Puerto Vallarta. I went to Cancun. It was over 2,000 miles away. Nothing was going on there. It was totally safe.
Okay, that's good news. Make us all feel good there, Alex. We appreciate that. Hey, thank
Yeah,
you so much
exactly.
for doing this. Obviously, a business development manager with the Hyatt Vacations and Hyatt Resorts. You do an unbelievable job. We appreciate all the support here on the podcast as well. And go get some vacation time. Go relax. How many vacations are you taking a year? Are you just that's part of your job? You get to do vacations for your work, don't you?
Yes, I do. I'm very blessed in the sense that I get to travel for my job and go to these places that probably wouldn't be able to go if I didn't have this job. So I'm very blessed, and I'm happy to help the advisors point you in the right direction and hopefully get down to those properties yourself.
All right. The inclusive collection with Hyatt. Alex joins us here, and we appreciate that.
Yes.
Alex, thanks for doing this. Always great to catch up with you.
Yeah, no problem, Andy. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Have a great day.